Without doubt, for me, printing my photos is one of the most enjoyable parts of photography. And today I'm going to run through my simplified approach to home photo printing. So if you're just starting out or if you're looking for a bit of a refresher, this video is definitely for you. So I absolutely love printing my photos, and I'm also fortunate enough to be able to sell some of my work too, which is actually even more rewarding. But every now and again, my wife and I like to change some of the prints that we've got hanging on our walls. So I'll be printing 3 different photos later on in the video. We're going to swap out these 3 woodland shots for something a little bit brighter. So in this video, I'll be discussing paper types, ink types, printers, monitor and room setups, and how to get accurate colours in your prints. And of course, all of the settings you're going to need to change in your software as well to get accurate colours in your printing. Now, if you don't have your own printer, I'm going to be sharing some tips about lab printing as well. Now, I often hear that printing your work is expensive, and while I think this is definitely true, I think that photography as a whole is actually one of the cheapest hobbies around. You know, once you've purchased your equipment, your camera gear, really it's only our travel costs, isn't it, that we have to pay out for. So buying some paper and a little bit of ink each month isn't that much of a burden on the pocket, especially if you compare it to, say, hobbies like golf or fly fishing, where memberships can run into their thousands. I also think it's one of the best ways of improving your photography as well. As soon as you see your best work in print, it opens up a wealth of new possibilities. It also shows up your flaws as well, which is another great way of learning, as harsh as it is. First, I think it's worth mentioning that not every single photo makes a great print, but I think one key consideration that can save you a heck of a lot of frustration is that what you see on your monitor is never going to be the same as what you see when you look at a print. So why can't we make a print look exactly the same as we see it on our monitor? Well, for one, the screen is backlit, so we've got a light coming from behind the image, whereas when we look at a print, the light is reflected off of it. And these 2 different types of lighting are really what prevents us from replicating exactly the same look. But apart from that, paper choice, ambient light, and whether we're putting glass in front of the print can play a massive part in how the print will look. So yeah, lots of different variables that really make matching the 2 completely impossible in my opinion. We can get them close, but not exactly the same. So let's talk about paper types, because I think this is an absolutely massive topic and there's so many choices available, and it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out with printing your photos. So I really like fine art papers, and I've tried many over the years. I've got a few here, but the one I currently print the majority of my work on is this one here, which is Photospeed's Platinum Etching 285. And this paper is an acid-free matte paper with a velvety soft texture. So I like to see a little bit of texture through my prints, but not so much for it to be distracting. And personally, I think the texture of the paper, if it dominates the print, then it can kind of take over from what's actually important, which of course is our artwork, isn't it? So I think this lightly textured fine art paper is perfect for my needs and suits almost all prints that I like to make. So let's compare it to this one, which has a very heavy texture to it. This one is called Natural Textured Bright White. And as you can see, it's got a very heavy texture to it. And I find this works well for painterly types of images, but I don't tend to use it that often. Another paper that I actually enjoy using is this PF Luster paper from Photospeed. And this is quite a bit cheaper actually, and it's great if you want to make a lot of prints. This whole box here, there's 50 in here, and these were test prints that I made for my zine. And yeah, I printed every single image here on this Luster paper. And this is the actual size that they were going to be in the zine. And it was a great way of, you know, getting sort of a proof of how it was actually going to look. And this paper is also very, very nice, especially if you're not going to be putting it behind glass, because it's got a bit of a sheen to it. So it helps to bring out those colours and the contrasts in the final print. So yeah, this Luster paper is great for a cost-effective way of printing your work. And I think there's nothing better than opening a box full of prints. You know, there's 50 in here. Just to be able to go through a selection of prints like this as opposed to looking at them on the screen is just so much more rewarding, isn't it? Now, most paper companies will offer a selection or test pack of paper which will contain several different types of paper so you can try them out. And this is how I came across Platinum Etching 285. And I think it's a great way of finding a paper stock that will work well for your type of work. Now, paper type is always going to be a personal thing, so you really need to test this out for yourself. But what I found is that sticking to, say, 1 or 2 different types of paper will be so much easier than actually, printing something different on different types of paper every single time. I think with printing, I think consistency is definitely key. I think I've got to a point now, because I've been using this paper and this setup for so long, that I pretty much know whether a print is going to work out before I print it. And that is all down to the consistency side of things, I think. So let's briefly talk about printers and ink before we get on to printing some of our images. So if you're thinking of buying a printer, the common types that a lot of people choose for home printing are inkjet printers like the one that I've got here. And typically there are 2 types of ink that are used in these types of printers, either dye or pigment. My printer here is a Canon Pro XS, which prints up to A3+ and uses 10 separate pigment inks. Now, pigment inks are typically used for professional printing, as they offer archival quality prints, meaning the print quality won't fade for a very long time. This is important for me as I sell my work, and obviously I want that print quality to last. One thing I should mention is that larger printers like A2 and bigger will be more expensive to buy, and the sets of ink will be more expensive as well, but they are far more economical to run than smaller printers. So take mine, for example. A set of 10 inks costs around about £110, but if I step up to an A2 printer, we're looking at about £500 for a set of ink. Now, although the initial outlay is more, the cost of the ink per milliliter is a lot less, making A2 printers far more economical in the long run. Now, I've had my printer here for about 6 years, and at the time when I purchased it, I was only selling the odd print now and again, but now I'm producing a lot more work. It's probably time that I actually upgraded my setup to, say, an A2 or larger, as the ink will work out cheaper for me in the long run. So the next step we're going to be talking about is so important, but before we move on to that, I just need to talk about today's sponsor, which is FlexiSpot. Long-term viewers of the channel will already know that I've actually been using FlexiSpot's products for many, many years. In fact, both of these height adjustable desks are from FlexiSpot, and I've been thoroughly impressed with their products so far. So as you know, photography involves a fair amount of office time, doesn't it? Especially during post-production or when we're creating prints like we're doing today. And having a comfortable chair, I think, is crucial for reducing fatigue, particularly if you struggle from back or neck pain like I do. Now, I've had a lot of office chairs over the years, and to be honest, haven't been that impressed with any of them until I tried this one. Now, this is the FlexiSpot C7 chair, and it's ergonomically designed to provide the best possible position for you when you're working. It features a self-adaptive dynamic system that adjusts as you move, offering you different levels of support depending on whether you're relaxing or sitting more upright while focusing on an edit. It's got 3 lockable positions, which is great for watching, say, YouTube, working hard, or just taking it easy. The chair is incredibly sturdy and can support up to £300. Now, one of the standout features for me is how the cushion tilts forward when I lean in, and I think this is really important because when I'm working on, say, intricate details during a long edit, I tend to lean forward quite a lot, and this feature really helps to keep me comfortable during those moments. The mesh design is also extremely comfortable, and it keeps you cool, allowing your skin to breathe, which is also great during those long editing sessions. If you'd like to learn more about the C7 chair by FlexiSpot, feel free to check out the link which is in the video description. You'll get a 30-day free return and a 10-year warranty. Also, FlexiSpot is having an anniversary sale with up to 65% off, and you'll have a chance to win free orders as well. You can use my exclusive code C782150 to purchase the C7, and for more amazing discounts, just click FlexiSpot. Anyway, let's get back into printing some photos. So it's often said that we should calibrate our monitors to get the best results, and while this can be true, I think calibrating a cheap monitor won't help that much. In fact, I would actually advise putting the money of a calibration device towards a better monitor, especially if you've got something on the budget end of the scale. A lot of good quality photo editing panels will come calibrated straight out of the box, so that would be my advice. I think Mac screens are pretty accurate, and my MacBook Pro screen here gives me really consistent results. And I've just set my BenQ monitor here to visually match my MacBook. and that works really well for me. I do have a calibration device, but I just haven't bothered to use it for this current setup. I haven't felt the need to. At the end of the day, if your prints are coming out, very different in colour from your screen, you're going to know that there's an issue with the colour management on your monitor, and then it might be a case of, getting a device to correct that. One big thing to think about though is the brightness and the contrast. And I can't really tell you what it should be for your monitor, but this is what I do for my MacBook Pro here. So I edit my images in Lightroom for the web using the built-in preset, which is designed for photography, called P3D65. And for me, this is ideal for social media and the web. And I think this is about the same as 9 bars of brightness if I was to dial it in manually. Now, when I'm editing for print, I turn my screen down to about 6 bars, so it's quite a lot duller. And this helps me to make sure my prints don't come out too dark. If your monitor has adaptive brightness or colour, I would definitely advise turning this off as well. As what we're really after here is consistency. I think the more consistent things are, the more accurate your prints will be, which obviously means less wasted ink and paper, which is always going to be a good thing. Another thing that could massively influence the screen as well is the ambient light in the room. So for me, I like my room to be fairly dim. So what I do is draw down the blind that I've got here, and the light sort of spills around the edges, and normally that's just enough light for me to keep things consistent. So not too bright, but not too dim either. Also, you don't want warm or cool light reflecting onto your screen either. So I definitely would want to turn my studio lights that I've got on here in the background before I do any editing, because I don't want that light, that warm and cool light bouncing around off my monitor. That could affect my color correction or color grading. Right, I think it's time to get into some printing. So as mentioned, I like Platinum Etching 285, and that's the paper that I'm going to be using for these prints today. So to be able to get a representation of what the image will look like on our chosen paper, it's advisable to install an ICC profile for the paper stock that we're going to use. Now, most manufacturers will provide you with a downloadable profile for their paper types, and you can usually download them from their website. You just follow a link on their website and the instructions to install them. It's pretty easy. Yeah, an ICC profile will tell your printer how to print, because without this, it really has no idea. After all, every single paper is different, and your printer needs to know this to be able to print it correctly. It's also a great way of seeing what your print will look like here in Lightroom as well. So you can see here I've got my edited image for the web, and if I click on soft proofing there at the bottom and select my ICC profile Platinum Etching, it's going to give us a representation of what the print will look like. And as you can see, if I print it like this, we're going to lose quite a lot of detail in the shadows. So it's during this soft proofing stage that we can make some adjustments to make sure when we print it, it's going to come out just how we want it to. So when we click on soft proofing, it also gives us a nice white background, which I think is actually better for printing, because our prints quite often will have a white border. Soft proofing will also create a virtual copy for us as well, so we can make adjustments to a different file and not the original one that we already made. So yeah, we've got 2 different files then, which is really helpful. What I tend to do is I tend to color code my images, so my web edits will be red and my prints will be blue, so I can quickly reference them when I go back through my catalogue. And a good way of making adjustments to a photo that is already edited for the web is to use a mask. Now, typically I'll use a brush mask and paint over the whole of the image. I can then make adjustments without affecting the original settings that I'd already made. Now, a good starting point I often find is to lift the shadows, lift the blacks a bit, maybe a little bit of positive exposure, and sometimes a saturation boost. But this, is going to be different for every single image. Quite often you'll find when printing that details in the darkest shadows can get lost if the shadows and blacks aren't lifted enough. So next I want to talk about an extra step that I think can get your prints just that tiny little bit better, and it's actually something that I really enjoy doing as well, and that is hard proofing. Now, I'm going to go through all of the print settings in just a moment when we make the final prints, but hard proofing is a way of really getting the best out of your photo before you go ahead and make a big print. So I think there's nothing worse than making a big print and it not quite matching your expectations. So here's what I do. So I sacrifice 1 sheet of A4 paper and allow myself up to 4 different versions of my image. Sometimes I don't need 4 goes at it, sometimes it works out first time, but you get my drift. If you can't get it right, in 4 goes, there's probably going to be something wrong with either your printer, your calibration, or maybe even your eyes. So yeah, that's something to bear in mind. So what I tend to do is make a print on 1/4 of the paper and let the ink dry for a few hours, come back and give it a good look in some nice soft window light. Say if I need to lift the shadows a bit, I'll go back and make another virtual copy in Lightroom, lift the shadows a bit and print it again. And this process ensures the very, very best results. If I'm sending my work to the lab to be printed, maybe say huge, I might make a full A4 size print as well to inspect it in a little bit more detail. So here's a few more hard proofs that I've made for today's prints. And as you can see, the difference in these 3 prints is very small. But in my opinion, this can make the difference between a perfect print and an almost perfect print. So I think it's well worth it in my opinion. But maybe I'm just a bit OCD, I don't know. Another thing I do is put a number next to each hard proof here. So these are number 1, 2 and 3. And then I star my hard proofs in Lightroom as well, or my soft proof should I say, in Lightroom as well, and give them the same corresponding number in stars, if that makes sense. So basically I can reference which was which here on paper and in Lightroom, so I can go back to it at a later date if I need to. So that works out really well for hard proofing and soft proofing your images. So let's get into the final print settings and make the final prints. By the way, the 3 prints I'm making for my wall today are now available on my website as a print pack. Now they're only available for the next 5 days, so if you fancy grabbing yourself some prints, feel free to check out the link in the video description. Your support is much appreciated, and the first 20 orders will receive a free copy of my zine, 30 days. Right, let's get into the settings. So let's talk settings. So first we're going to click on the print module, and this will open up our selected image in the print module. The first thing I do is go over to the box on the left called page settings and set my paper size, orientation, and make sure the correct printer is checked. Then I select the margin size. So typically I go for a 2.5 centimeter margin, but for these ones I'm pushing it out a little bit further to 1.5 centimeters. So on my setup here, I can't actually print borderless fine art prints. I can for luster paper, but not fine art papers. But that's absolutely fine. I always leave a border anyway. So the next section I use is the printer job section, and this is really, really important. Typically, I set my resolution to 300 ppi, print sharpening to low, and my paper to matte, because obviously I'm using a matte paper. Under profile, I'll choose my ICC profile that we spoke about earlier to instruct the printer on how to print on our chosen paper, and choose either perceptual or relative. Now I usually play around with these two in soft proofing to see which one works best. For these particular prints, I'm going to choose relative. Then I'm going to open the print box, come down to printer options and select quality and media and change these settings. I'll make sure matte paper is selected because we are on matte paper, and I want my paper source to be from the manual feed drawer and print quality to be high. And then I'm going to click print, and I can't wait to see what they look like. So I'm super happy with these 3 prints, and I think they look really nice, and I can't wait to get them in their frames and put on the wall. It's always a really exciting thing, and it always feels like the final part of the journey, doesn't it, when we see them hanging up there in all their glory. I'll show you them hanging in just a second, but before we get on to that, I just want to mention printing from the lab first, because again, this is another great way of printing your work. So you don't need to own a printer to enjoy printing your work. Lab printing is, in lots of ways, actually can be more cost effective, but I think choosing a decent lab is crucial. Now, I've been using Loxley Colour for over a decade now, and I've always been really happy with their service. Now, a good lab will allow you to download their own custom ICC profiles that you can use for soft proofing your photos like we did for printing here at home. So I would highly advise finding a lab that offers this service. It's also advisable as well to do some test prints as well. And I think especially if you're making, say a large print, it could actually end up saving you a ton of money in the long run. Most labs allow you to upload your final TIFF or JPEG file directly into their software as well, which allows you to see what it will look like when it's framed. This is also another great thing about lab printing. You can order frames, canvases, acrylics, all sorts. Anyway, here's the final prints hanging on my lounge wall, and I think they look absolutely great up there, and they definitely brighten up the place a bit. It'd be nice if there was a bit more ambient light falling on them, but yeah, I think they look nice anyway. If you've got any tips on printing photos that I haven't covered in today's video, please leave a comment down below. It's always great to hear your thoughts, especially as printing is such a deep passion of mine. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give the video a like. That really does help me out. The link up here somewhere will take you to another video that I'm sure you'll find interesting, and the link up here will take you to my ebook all about landscape photography composition, which is a great way of supporting the channel and gaining some of my knowledge. Anyway, I hope to see you all again next week.